In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we bring our guest to the table today, we pause as we always do on America in Black and White to honor the giants who walked before us, to speak their names with intention, and to ensure that the brilliance of Black innovation is never buried beneath the weight of a history that too often forgot to write it down. Today, we lift the name of Mark Edward Dean, a man born in the small town of Jefferson City, Tennessee, on March 2nd, 1957, who grew up to change the way the entire world communicates, computes, and connects. As a young boy, he tutored older students in trigonometry while he himself was still in the first grade. He was from his very first breath extraordinary. Mark Dean went on to earn his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from the University of Tennessee with the highest honors, and later a master's degree from Florida Atlantic University. But his crowning academic achievement came in 1992 when he earned his PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford University, one of the most rigorous and prestigious institutions of learning in the world. Long before that doctorate, however, Mark Dean had already rewritten the architecture of modern civilization. In 1981, he was part of the elite team that co-created the IBM personal computer, and he holds 3 of the 9 original IBM PC patents. Think about that. 3 of the 9 foundational patents for the machine that ushered in the personal computing era belonged to a Black man from Tennessee. His fingerprints are on the very foundation of the digital world we inhabit today. Perhaps his most enduring architectural contribution is the invention of the ISA bus, the industry standard architecture, which he developed alongside colleague Dennis Mahler. This bus is the invisible infrastructure that allowed peripheral devices, that printers, modems, and monitors, to communicate with a personal computer. In other words, Mark Dean built the roads that allowed the digital world to talk to itself. He didn't just work inside the machine, he built the language the machine uses to connect to everything around it. In 1995, IBM recognized his extraordinary genius by naming him the first ever African-American IBM Fellow, the highest level of technical distinction at one of the world's most powerful technology companies. In 1997, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. In 1999, he led the team that built the first 1 gigahertz processor chip, and in 2001, he was elected to the National Academy of Engineering. In 2019, Knox County, Tennessee, declared April 25th Mark Dean Day, a day that belongs to him as so much of the digital age already does. We tell you about Mark Dean because his story is the story of this show. It is the story of Black excellence existing quietly and powerfully in every field, in every lab, every pulpit, every courtroom, every prison yard, every seminary, every community center. It is the story of a man who built infrastructure so that others could connect, could communicate, could reach further than they ever thought possible. And it is a reminder to every young Black child watching or listening right now, the technology in your hands, the computer on your desk, the world at your fingertips, a Black man helped build that. See yourself in that. Walk in that. Build your own version of that. Today, we welcome a man whose life work is its own kind of infrastructure, one built not in silicon and circuits, but in faith, service, and unshakable love for people that the world too often overlooks. Now, let me introduce our guests. I want to welcome home everyone, welcome you all back to America in Black and White, the place where we refuse to let complexity of this nation go unexamined, where we believe that every story matters, where we know that the full picture of America has never been adequately told by those who only look at part of it. Whether you're joining us for the very first time or you have been riding with us since season one, we are grateful, profoundly, sincerely grateful that you chose to spend this time with us, because we do not take lightly what it means to have your ears, your heart, and your attention. This is sacred ground, and today it is especially so. There's a truth that does not make the nightly news, that does not trend on social media, that does not get celebrated at the award shows, and that truth is this: some of the most transformative work happening in America today is happening in the most unexpected places. It is happening in the corridors of correctional facilities, where the smell of institution and the sound of iron doors closing cannot silence the word being spoken over men and women who have been told their stories are over. It is happening in the halls of seminaries, where ordinary people wrestle with ancient texts and emerge carrying something the world desperately needs: wisdom, compassion, and a calling that cannot be contained. It is happening on the streets of our communities, in the living rooms of broken families, in the churches that are holding the neighborhoods together, even when the neighborhood doesn't know it. Grace, it turns out, shows up in the most unexpected places, and so do the servants who carry it. Today's episode is about transformation, not the sanitized, made for television kind, but the real, costly, hard-won transformation that happens when a human being decides that their pain will not be the period at the end of their sentence, but the comma that leads to something greater. We're talking about what happens when struggle becomes school, when suffering becomes strength, and when life forged in fire emerges not as ash, but as something unbreakable and luminous and ready to light the way for everyone who comes behind. We're talking about the kind of lives that make you believe again in people, in purpose, in a God who doesn't waste a single chapter of a human story. Our guest today walked a road that would have broken many. His journey has taken him through the depths of loss, the heights of calling, from the classroom to the congregation, from the seminary to the cell block, from personal transformation to community revolution. He is a scholar, a servant, a pastor, and a prophet in the truest sense of that word. A man who speaks truth to forgotten and the fallen and dares to call them beloved. His story is one of conviction, both the kind that comes from faith and the kind that comes from standing inside a system and refusing to look away from the human beings it holds. His story is one of community, of choosing again and again to show up where the need is greatest and the reward is least visible. And his story is one of calling, of a man who heard something deep in his spirit that the world could not drown out and chose to follow it wherever it led. We have been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, And we know you're going to be moved, challenged, informed, and inspired by what you are about to hear. Please open your hearts and make room for our guest. He carries a story that deserves to be told, and he carries it with grace, with scholarship, and with a love for people that you will feel before he speaks his second sentence. American Black and White, Season 4, Episode 68. It is our honor, our joy, and our profound privilege to welcome to this platform the Reverend Dr. Theologian, Correctional Minister, Community Servant, and Man of God, Dr. Gregory F. Bearstop. Dr. Bearstop, welcome, and we are glad that you are here today.
Thank you, Mr. King. Wow. I need to take you everywhere I go.
So, well, how are you? And thanks for being here today.
I'm good. It's always I appreciate a platform like this because wow, where else can we go? I wish I had this when I was young to be able to look up because as you know, many of us, especially black kids, we didn't know of people in our community. We didn't know about the great things that have been accomplished, and we had no platform. We certainly wasn't going to get it from television and the four stations that was available to us.
Exactly. So, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we jump into the show?
Well, I just like to thank everyone tuning in, and as Mr. King, as you said, this is sacred ground, and these are the stories of, I'm honored, incredibly honored to be part of this platform and to be able to share this platform with the many that have come before me as well as that are to come, because I love it when you say this is holy ground, because it really is. A lot have gone into people's struggle to get them to where they are today. And we just know that individuals who tune in, they're going to be all the more better for tuning in.
Right. And so, as we get into the show today, I always like to make sure that, I give our audience the opportunity to learn a lot more about the guests before we jump into the other parts of the meats and potatoes here in this great stew. And so I call this your early life and upbringing, your foundations. And take us back to the beginning. Where did you grow up, and what did that world look, feel, and sound like for a young Gregory Bearstop?
Well, I grew up in Washington D.C. Inner city in Washington D.C. at a time where it was called Chocolate City. So I grew up with chocolate and loved it. I grew up where my mother took me to the Catholic Church. I was 5 years old, and my grandmother took me to the Baptist church. So I got the best from both worlds. And so at a young age, especially growing up Catholic, I saw the priest on the altar, and just that calling you mentioned, I just felt called. I don't know, it was God calling, but I was too young to understand that. But it was an inner voice, that an inner attraction to the things of God. And so I wanted to be. I told my mother, I want to be that, like that guy, that priest up there on the altar. And she said, okay, but we'll wait till you get a little older. But it never left me. And then when I was I was in elementary school, St. Augustine's Catholic School in Washington, D.C., and there was a young girl who was a class behind me. Her uncle was a priest. And so her mother drove me to Baltimore to meet him, and he was impressed. And he said, at that time, yeah, I think you'd be a great candidate for the seminary. And back then they had high school seminaries, which they don't exist now. And that's good. We're in a different time. But back then, that was very common for a young 14-year-old to go to the seminary. But so I went into seminary, and I was the only black in the seminary. So that was eye-opening, in a culture where I left Chocolate City to go to go to a world unknown to me, and but it was beautiful, to get to know different people, different cultures. And I did experience racism. They did prepare me for that. But for the most part, the town that the seminary was in, I was blown away because growing up in the early '70s and some influence in the '60s, I thought, I thought, most white people were racist. So it was good, but growing up in this town, oh my God, everybody in the town was white, but they weren't racist. I must not have been there was a lady that always baked cookies for me when she saw me coming down the street, and and when I graduated from the high school, there was a gentleman, white gentleman, owned the department store, and he said, "Oh my God, it's your graduation! I got to get you a gift." And he was throwing stuff into the grocery cart, suits, ties. I said, "Oh man," I said, "I don't need." But he says, "No, it's your graduation. You want to celebrate." So it was like, wow, these are white people that were treating me wonderfully. So what I learned through that experience really is that it doesn't matter the color of your skin. It really matters who the person is. And there's been a lot of wonderful white people, a lot of wonderful black people, and also not so good, on both sides. So um, that's just the reality. That's just the truth. So at that point, I went on to the seminary. I was with the Redemptorist Order, and their whole, you hear about, with, now we have a new Pope, American Pope, Pope Francis. Uh, he was, I believe, a part of the, am I saying it right? Augustinian? I hope I'm not, but he was a part of a religious order. And I was too. I was with the Redemptorists, and the Redemptorists is an order that serves the poor and most abandoned of people. So if you poor and most abandoned, that's where we were, and which attracted me even more. I love, the underdog, the person that is least rejected. Nobody wants. That's what draws me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in their seminary system. They had, they had your own college to go to and graduate studies. But and in college, growing up in the inner city, I went to class. I didn't know what they were talking about. The words, the big words they were using. I said, "Oh Lord, I'm gonna flunk out of college. I'm not gonna make it." But there was two black guys that graduated ahead of me, um, 4 years ahead of me, and they gave me the book, the autobiography of Malcolm X, and they told me to read it and give them a report. And I said, "Give you a report? I got enough work to do. I'm in college." But they said, "Give me a report," and I gave them. But what changed my life in that book Malcolm X wrote was when he said, "In order to master the world, you got to know the language." So what he did when he was in jail, Malcolm X, he memorized the dictionary. And so what I did was I thought, well, if I'm going to make it out of this college, why don't I do the same thing? So I memorized the dictionary and all the words in it. It took me 2 years. And from that point, I went from the bottom of the class to among the top. And my whole world expanded. And of course, I made it through there. And then I went to graduate studies. But before 2 years of becoming a priest, I guess the Lord called me in a different place. So I felt like I needed to leave. I was no longer drawn to that. And now I got to get a job like everybody else. So that kind of got me where I am now.
So tell us, what was your family like? Who were the anchors in your life as a child, and what did they pour into you that you still carry today?
And it definitely was my mother. Let me tell you something. I was more afraid of my mother than the police. You
That's
know,
most of us.
I said, oh my God, give me the police any day. So she instilled in me, justice. She was a person of justice. She didn't accept, as in the old days, they said crap from anybody. There was another word she used though. But, you know, and that's one of the reasons they wouldn't let her go down south, because they definitely would have killed, because she wouldn't have stood for segregation or telling her what she couldn't do. So I got a lot of my sense of justice, what's right and wrong, from her. I can't even steal a piece of candy without feeling guilty about it, and which actually happened, and I just was torn. So I couldn't do any of that. So that would probably be my anchor there.
What did your neighborhood or community teach you about yourself, about who you were, and who you could become?
Well, that took a while, but um, growing up, especially, we were told black people were no good. They used another word, of course, the N word, but and that that was reflected somewhat on television, where you watch movies. We always had the servant role, and what I hated was we always, even to this day, sometimes we are in the roles of the drug dealer. We're in the roles of we're the drug dealer. We're the gangbanger. We're the people that shoot them up. I can no longer watch movies like that. I refuse. I was in Europe one time, and these guys, the waiter came to the table. I was in Italy. He said, "What are you guys, all basketball players?" And I'm thinking, black people, we do more than play basketball. Some of us are doctors. We are, lawyers, and but growing up, that's what I didn't know that. We didn't see that on television. We didn't see people like that. So, but slowly, my mother got involved with Black History Month, and she would come home and tell me about people like you just did, who, built the internet, who was responsible for the internet, the traffic light. I didn't know that were black people responsible. The first airplane, sorry to tell you, wasn't the Wright brothers. It was a black man. Most people don't know that. And they destroyed his plane. He shipped it on a train. They destroyed the plane on the train.
Right. Yeah. So, but as you think about that, and you have these people pouring into you, where was that point that you realized that things that Gregory wanted and what Gregory was going to do, that you had planned to do, to start, that kicked you off, as far as your career goes and the things that you're doing today? What was that point?
Well, there was really 2 points. One was in college, because I was a very quiet person. I didn't think what I had to say meant anything to anybody. But that same guy that gave me the autobiography of Malcolm X, he said to me one day, he said, Greg, we want to hear from you. I was like, why? And he said, because it's coming from you. And that woke me up to something, that you whatever I have to say is valuable. Somebody out there wants to hear what I have to say. So that was a turning point for me. But the other piece was, honestly, I was on a job, and I met a guy, a white guy. He was my best friend to this day. And he said to me, he got to know, we were complaining about all the paperwork, and we got to know each other. And he said that he'd been through college, and been on. He always went to. He liked HBCUs, but he said, as he got to know me, he said, "You restored my faith in humanity." And I said, "I did." What did I do? And he said, "Just by being who you are, I could tell there's something different about you. I could tell it's you're not like other people." And that stuck with me. and it kind of emboldened me to kind of forge my own path. Uh, and forging my own path meant that I could step out there, but I knew it would be lonesome because I always felt that I fit nowhere. I really didn't. I wasn't black enough, hip enough, but I certainly ain't white. So I kind of felt like I felt there was nowhere for me. But that's okay. There's still a place. God has a place for me.
So, can you tell us, were there early experiences of hardship or struggle in your childhood that looking back, you now see a preparation rather than the punishment?
Yeah, I couldn't. I had a hard time learning. And this is crazy. I was in class and they give you those IQ tests, and they were passing out the results of the IQ test. I didn't know then, but I got a 40, and I read that's like a vegetable. I thought I had done something. I didn't know what a 40 IQ is. I thought that was pretty, smart. But I learned that that's like being a vet. So I tell my you've been working with a vegetable all your life. So
Oh my God.
but a lot of black kids go through this. We're not, sometimes you're not good testers, but we carry that the rest of our life. I'm dumb. I'm not that smart. The test told me I wasn't that smart, you know, but that's, I didn't feel that way because I was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this test. um, but that was a hardship that I had to struggle with and constantly remind myself that I can do this, that I am smart. I can figure things out. I do have something to contribute and is valuable. So that test was like, wait a minute, these tests that people give, this test is not it doesn't define you. It doesn't, and what people say doesn't define you. So I had to learn that, but thank God I had a best friend that could tell me that, because boy, when he met, and if you had met me, you'd be like, oh my God, this guy is in, whoo, there's a lot of work needed.
So, when did you first encounter faith? And was it something you were raised with or something that found you later?
Well, yes, I was raised with it sort of as a foundation, but honestly, can I call you Charles or Mr. King?
Yes, yes,
Charles,
Charles.
honestly, Charles, and I think this is for most people, that a lot of people watching may not tell people, but because you think, well, they'll never believe this, but I encountered God, and when I had those encounters, I remember I was driving to a church in Charlottesville, and I was coming to train tracks, and I was, young kid, 20 years old, driving. I was going to pull up behind the car, right behind the car in front, but it would have put my car on the train track. So right before I was about to pull up behind this car, I heard that again, that voice. And I know it wasn't me, but I heard this voice said, stop. And as soon as it said stop, I hit the brakes. Charles, within seconds, an Amtrak train whisked in front of me doing 120 miles an hour, inches from my bumper. And if I had not had listened to that voice, we wouldn't have this podcast right now. I wouldn't be joining you tonight. So it is encounters with God like that that really woke me up to faith.
Wow. I tell you, I had to on one of my other shows, um, I can say that I'm here purely by faith because I was in the military, had got back home off a deployment, and a friend of mine and I went down to New Orleans. We went down there. We were coming back. I was dropping him off in Gulfport, Mississippi. Well, he decided he wanted to have something extra to eat, and so I took him by the ATM machine. And after he got back in the car, and we were getting ready to get back on the road. Everything went black. I don't remember what happened. Everything was told to me what happened, but we were in a car accident. We were hit by a truck.
Oh my God.
Yeah. On Highway 59, Gulfport, Mississippi. I died right there on the highway.
Wow.
EMTs resuscitated me, stabilized me, got me to Gulfport Biloxi Memorial Hospital, where they only could stabilize me. I was still touch and go. They didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And lo and behold, just having strength, being physically fit, and things of that nature is what saved my life, because they had to medevac me to San Antonio, Texas for surgery.
Wow.
But the thing about that is, at that point, of course, they would not have known this, and I didn't contest. But I had a DNR. I've had a DNR now for the last 40 years.
Wow. They didn't know it.
They didn't know it.
Thank God. Thank God
Yeah.
they didn't know it. Did you go through that typical experience where people leave their body and the light? Did you see the light? And
Really? I did.
Oh wow.
Yep.
See, a lot of
But
people don't want to talk about that because they feel like people don't want to. People, wouldn't believe it, or the person who was imagining things or dreaming.
Yep, but I didn't walk through. I stayed back and I kept looking, and I'm like, why is that light shining through that door?
Wow.
Yeah.
So you didn't walk. You didn't walk through. Thank God. Did you know not to walk through?
Well, I mean, no, that was everything was just on the conscious level, and so I guess that means that I had so
You
much more
knew.
to live for and so much to do.
You just knew intuitively. Yeah.
So, can you tell us, was there a person, a teacher, a pastor, or a grandparent, a coach who saw something in you before you saw it in yourself? Tell us about them.
Well, I think that I think there was a number of people. I don't think it was one person. I just know there was a one. But honestly, um, I think it was a number of people. My brothers. My brothers used to always encourage me. My mother used to share my report card with my youngest brother, Martinez, and Andre. Martinez was like, "What, boy, you're really smart." And I was like, "God, if he only knew." But hearing that from your brother, it gives you a little boost. So, it takes it's a village. My family, my cousins, all of them really stand by me and say, "We're proud of you." It made me feel like, well, I guess I do have something to offer, because let me just tell you, as Black people, we don't realize, especially with the undertone messages through commercials. Yes, commercials that you watch today on TV. Yes, through the news that you watch right now, you're getting subtle messages that you're nothing, that you don't matter, that you don't have nothing to contribute. You know, and we don't realize those subtle messages, even the gestures, affects us and chips away at our personhood, as our somebodyness. Um, so yeah, it was a number of people that I could say, definitely my family, and but I'll say this: my best friend, JD. I guess he doesn't. I hope he doesn't mind me calling his name out, but I'd be dead without him. You know, and he would tell you, there were moments I felt like giving up. And he would say, no, you're special. Everybody else, they don't see it, but I see it. And I'm like, what are you seeing? I wish I could see what you see it. you know. But when everybody else, other people told me, oh, you can't lead anybody out of a paper bag, he would say, you're the best person to lead out, not just out of the paper bag, the world. So to have someone like that, you know, that's always in your corner, always affirming. And even when he chastised me, it's in a way that uplifts you, you know? And
Wow.
one of the biggest, we have it all down. We stick it to somebody, violence with somebody. Oh, that I'm not a punk. I'm gonna take it to you. It's upside down. That's weakness. Then you get locked up, and now you're away from your family. You can't live your dreams. You can't make the money that's going to be good for the community to invest in. You know, better. But true strength is when you're able to walk away sometimes. True strength is when you're able to talk it through sometime with somebody. But we say, he's a punk. He's a sissy. You know, he don't know how to. It's totally the opposite. And I never met anybody but my best friend JD who was able to affirm that and say, no, you were correct, Greg. You know, everybody else, you're gonna punk out on me. You see what I'm saying? You know,
Right.
yes, there's a time for everything. But that's what's wrong with the Black community. You know, I'm right here, I'm in my office in jail. And I just came from one of the officers telling me he just came back from taking somebody to the hospital. He said half the people in there shot up and dying. Black people. Black people.
Oh my God.
Right now.
Right.
But why is that? Why is that? That's because we have it upside down. We think that killing each other, pulling a gun, firing at somebody is strength. It's not. It's weak. Because look what it's doing to our community. Having half of us dead is not strength, brothers and sisters.
Yep.
Having half of us injured is not strength. We need numbers.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Charles.
Yeah, right. But so let's transition over. Let's transition over to what I call the call. Well, I'm talking. I want to ask you some questions about your journey to ministry and seminary. Tell us about the moment or the season when you felt genuinely called to ministry. Was it a single moment, or did it creep up on you slowly?
Oh no, I knew when I was 5 that God, it's a anointing. I guess you're set aside, And I'm not saying I'm not special or anything. It's just you got a mission. You got a mission that's, it ain't about making a lot of money. I knew I wasn't going to be a millionaire. not in this calling. It's like, no, you're sure. No, you ain't gonna be a millionaire. You're not gonna be, you're not gonna have the yacht. You're not gonna have, you know what I mean. But it was okay because I wanted to help people, So, I feel like my life has come full circle. I started working with a redemptorist order of people, of priests and brothers that wanted to help the poor and most abandoned. But guess what? Look where I am now. Look where I'm talking to you. I'm in a jail. Who's more poor and abandoned than folks that are locked up? So answering your question, it's always been in me, and I think when I was in seminary, they said, they called me in their office and said, I think this brother is struggling with celibacy. And so, Charles, part of the reason I left, I didn't want you reading about me in the Washington Post. What has he done now? You know, but yes, I probably was struggling with celibacy. And it wasn't my priest, but why I got to be celibate? So it's like, can I be a priest and have relationships? No. Okay, so I did y'all a favor, kept myself out of the Washington Post, and I left. But before that happened, they wanted me to think about. They stopped my studies and wanted me to think about my calling. And they sent me. I said, "Oh God, we're going to send you to a church to preach it." I was like, "Oh God, where they going to?" But then they said that we're going to send you to the U.S. Virgin Islands. There's a church there. I said, "The Caribbean? Hey, I think I can do this." So there I was in St. Croix, Virgin Islands. Beaches. Yeah, I don't know. You've been in the Caribbean, gorgeous, but the church is right on the beach. Paradise, you know. And then I started church. I was in the pew. This is a huge cathedral. I'm thinking, where are the people? But by the third Sunday, the place was packed because I tried to be theatrical. You know, the Baptist side of me came out, and there was a lady. There was a lady who made me, because I would say something from the pulpit, and she would say, "Well, you know, ladies, you know, lady, get you going." And then I'd say something else, "My Lord," you know. So we had that dialogue, and they just, the more they said, the better I became. And so that just set me on fire. And I took some of that, and we do that in the jail here. We started 2 years ago. There was no church service. Now there's a weekly church service. We started with 10 people. Now there's almost 200 coming every week.
How did the people around you respond when you shared that calling? Was there support, skepticism, or something in between?
Mix. It was mixed. It was mixed. In other words, there was people that were saying, "Now, Greg, you're not being forced to do this. You know, you can always." My mother would always call me, "You know, you can always come home. You know, wherever you want to. You're not forced." My uncles would call you. You know, your mother not making you become a priest. No, 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 no. You know, and you know how mothers are. You know, and what they hear about, you know, the church. And I would get so embarrassed because she would call me up on the phone and say, "Gregory, nobody's touching you." What are you talking about? I'm like, "Mom, what are you talking about?" You know how black mothers are. You know how black mothers are. Anybody touching me, you know. I was like, "What the, you know, Mom, you know, I'm studying."
But you know that protection of mom is like none other, which is why we all feared her more than we feared anybody else, because
Oh
that
my
fire
God.
is fury.
Yeah, she said, "I'll be on it." Back then, you know, we you know, we didn't have that much money. She said, "You know, if somebody touch you, I'll be on the next Greyhound bus."
Wow.
Up there. I said, "Oh Lord." But you know, this is the, you know, this is the community. It takes a community
Yeah.
to keep you safe,
Uh,
you know.
what did the decision? What did the decision to pursue seminary mean for you personally, financially, relationally, spiritually, and what did you have to? What did you have to lay down to go?
Well, what it meant for me, as I mentioned it, uh, the world. I had to, you know, not. This is not going to be. You're not going to be rich. You're not going to have money, a lot of money. So, you know, I had to let go of all of that stuff. You know, but it was okay because, you know, when you experience God, that's more than no amount of money could capture that. You know, and God has been with me ever since. You know, as I said, you know, learning how to pray, learning how to talk to God, but most of all, you know, when you're in the seminary, when you're going to be a minister, you got to get down and dirty with people. You know, when I was stationed in the Caribbean, you know, I was sleeping in tin huts. You know, I would go to tin where the floor is dirt and be there with the people. You know, it's not easy. You know, but it really makes you have a heart for people. The world lives in poverty more so now when so few people have wealth, most 90% of the wealth. So spiritually, it really made me aware of what life is all about. That, it's not money. I used to think relationships was it when I find somebody. But shoot, I thought, they could wake up the next door. You wake up in bed next day, I don't want to be with you no more. I mean, what do I do
Right.
now? Heartbroken. It's happened. So,
Right.
I learned that people are not, they're not the answer. But God has, like you experienced that car accident, everything went black, and for you to be here, wow. When you experience the light, but you're not gonna, it's not gonna be easy. The more you are close to the light, the more the darkness is going to try to take over, and it tries to take over people, especially in our community. And the only way you can drive that out is with things like what you're doing. You got to bring light to people, even when they're spitting in your face, even when they're talking behind your back, even when they're creating narratives behind your back to put you down.
Yep.
You got to keep giving light. It's not easy.
Yep. So so as you evolved, and you went through the different churches, you went through the seminary. So when you completed all of that, what did you do with the community, or how did you show your gratefulness to the community for these things? Not only had you learned, but in the teachings that they needed to hear.
After leaving the seminary and back to the community, um, the most important thing, encourage people in terms of prayer. But you know what? The best thing anybody can do, especially if you're listening here, is be the gospel, be love. I like to use this. I got this from one of my favorite authors, Anthony DeMello, and it struck me. He says, being love, and he says it's like a tree. Does a tree with all his branch, when it see a bad person coming, does it move its branches out of the way and not give shade to them? No, it gives shade to the good and bad. Does a flower withhold its scent from bad people or only give it to good people? No. Only give it to good people they like? No. It gives its fragrance to everybody. That's what I want to do with the community. Not whether I'm not here to judge. I'm in a jail. People have done many, most people in here were murder.
Right.
I don't want to know what they did. They're still a human being. And when I meet them, we the best connection. And that's what I want to do. That's how I want to give back to the community, is to be love itself. Not discriminate, not be judgmental, but be the gospel, be God, Christ, as a Christian to people, and work on myself. I don't want to be somebody that gossip, talk behind people's backs. I don't want to be somebody that when somebody greet them, they mug at them. I had a guy in here, he used to mug at me all the time, and then I connected, the human connection. He said, "Man, I like your suit. Is that a Windsor tie?" And I showed him how to tie a tie. And we're like, and he's one of the roughest people in here, And then we connected. And every time I remind him, I said, "You remember how you used to mug at me every time you saw me? You frowned on, oh, go on, Dr. Bearstop, go on with that." And I said, "Yeah, but that's what's wrong. I always go after the toughest one, and just show them that I'm not afraid of, but behind that tough exterior, they're crying out."
Yeah.
And when we connected and showed him how to tie a tie, he didn't know how to tie a tie. 42 years old, didn't know how to tie a tie. He said, "Now I can show he had 5 sons, and he's proud. I can show my sons how to tie a tie." And we just connected, But I do remind him when he was mugging at me.
Yes. Yeah. Let's move over to behind the walls. Let's talk a little bit about your ministry and work in corrections. When did you first feel called specifically to ministry inside jails and prisons, and what made you say yes to that particular assignment?
You know what? I never thought I could. I didn't want this. I didn't know. I'm a program chief here of a division, but I never asked for it. But then we we say director or warden called me up and said, we have a vacancy for leadership of division, but we your name wasn't given to us. I had a lot of other names, but I told them I have to go home and pray on this. And she said she was in prayer and the Lord gave her my name. And she called me and asked me. And I said, I can't do that. I don't know how to, I'm not, who am I? But then when she said the Lord gave her name, I said, cool. I said, I'm glad I'm on the Lord's mind.
Okay.
So I said, well, if the Lord is saying this to you, I need to be obedient. So I accepted. And here I am, but when you accept the Lord's task, the forces of darkness are going to come after you, big time. And so, but that's what any role that you're being called to, especially if the Lord is calling you to it. So you need to expect that. But one of the things, I just feel like the Lord is all about action, and maybe that's why He put me here. Is I'm tired, especially with doctors, yes, I've, a doctorate, but, I don't care what you have. If you don't have no degree, the time now is for action. We do too much talking, well, let's, how many meetings I go to and then we just talk, we just talk. Well, let me talk about this process. We've been talking about homelessness for 100 years and still got more homeless people than we had then. I'm tired of talking. I'm about action. Right. And so one of the things we've done a lot, and and I say it's a team, and we've gotten GED in here. People can get their high school diplomas, and there's people who are in jail and left, and they're coming back as doctors. They're coming back as owning their own business. So it's all about action. We got to take action to make people's lives better. The biggest thing is mental health. The jails have become the new mental health institute. When Ronald Reagan closed a lot of those institutions in the 80s and put them people out on the street, there was no place for them. There was no provision for mental health. And if you're not mentally stable, we can give you a home, we can give you a job, but guess what? You're going to lose the home. You're going to lose the job because you're not stable. So I really press that if you're in the community, it's okay. And we need to break this stigma, especially in the Black community, that having a therapist and talking to someone is crazy. No, you know what's crazy? Is not talking to someone professional. With all the stress that we have, especially being Black, that's what's crazy, that you don't have a therapist or someone that you can talk to and run things up. The healthiest thing I ever did, and still am, I have a therapist. I still have one.
Same here. Same here.
And it's made me better. We got to get rid of the stigma in the Black community that therapy, you are more stable, you will accomplish more when you have somebody that you can talk to and bounce things off of that's professional. The mental health, systemic research show people especially in the Black community that get mental health therapy, they never come to jail. And the people that get it in jail never come back. So my mission here is to make sure every incarcerated individual has weekly therapy, one-on-one, and group is good too. But some people, they don't want to share. You can't share everything in a group. Right. You can't share everything in a group. So people need one-on-one.
Right. May is Mental Health Month.
Yes, yes,
And so, I think the more people learn about, their mental health and keeping it as strong as possible, now is the time to do that. And as you mentioned, I do recommend that we all at least talk to somebody at some point in time, because I think we all need to do that to relieve any of these pressures that we have, especially Black men.
absolutely. So that's one of my personal missions here in the jail, is to make sure every incarcerated most of our population is Black males anyway, right here. And so I want every one of them to be able to get one-on-one weekly therapy. It's going to make it so much better. They're not going to need to come back here, and they won't. And that's the whole, we want people to leave the jail better than when they came in. And we're not doing that. We're not doing our job. I said I'm about action.
Right. I like that. And, I
I'm
think
tired of
if
talking.
most of those places would actually do that and it was on one accord, then I agree that most likely most of those guys would not come back. Describe your very first time walking into a correctional facility or for ministry, for ministry purposes. What did you see? What did you feel? And what did you sense in that moment?
I was scared. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was scared. I said, "Oh Lord, is somebody gonna?" Because you look at the TV, you see the, the rape and somebody grab you, and and
Shaking.
I'm a little guy.
Right.
I said, "Oh
Right.
Lord, I don't. I have no. Now I know why people work out." So
Right.
so it was afraid. I was buying into all the stereotypes, but then getting in here, and I first started with running a substance abuse treatment program, because there's a lot of people coming because of drugs, whether it's kingpins, people dealing drugs, and then they become their own best customers. So, but when I got in there and actually started to go into the cell and sit down, and that was intimidating too. I was like, oh Lord, now I'm in the cell with the brother, you know. Uh, but when I sat down and just realized that he's just like somebody standing in line at the bank. He's not different. He's not these, he just made him, lost his way or didn't have that guidance you're talking about, didn't have a male mentor, didn't go through the rites of passage. And this is where he landed, and it could be me, could be any of us. I'm not immune, you know, especially being Black in America, so, I could walk out here right now. In fact, it did happen. I was coming back from Brazil and through customs, and they stopped me and my friend, give me your passports, and give me your passport. Yeah, and I'm like, now all these white people that walk past me, y'all don't let these people. The only Black people you stop up. I said, I got something for them. Yeah, give me your passport. What do you do for a living? I'm chief of division in the jail. Oh, they couldn't. They almost broke their hand giving my passport back. It's like, again, stereotyping Black people. That because I'm wearing a hoodie and I must be nothing or whatever, into drugs or gang banging. So going into jail and sitting with these brothers and sisters, they're just like us. And what it is they need somebody to care about them. They need somebody to take the time. You know how much it means just to sit and listen to these brothers. And I never want to disappoint them, because when they need something, I always try to deliver, because you know what? They've been disappointed all their life. People have promised them thing after thing. Even their parents